Captain James Ellis gripped the controls tightly as the Odyssey bucked wildly through the planet's thick atmosphere. Warning sirens blared through the cockpit, painting the desperate situation in a cacophony of red flashing lights and urgent sounds. "Status report," James shouted over the noise, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We've lost the aft stabilizers, and the main engine is offline," responded Lieutenant Mark Thompson, his eyes flicking between the various readouts on his console. "Attempting to reroute power to secondary systems now." Beside him, Chief Engineer Alex Ramirez was frantically working on the console, his fingers moving deftly over the controls. "I'm trying to get us some juice, Captain, but it's like kicking a dead whale through space." "Focus on life support and communications. Keep us alive and talking," James commanded, his gaze locked on the approaching ground visible through the forward viewport, a lush expanse rushing up to meet them. "Communications are barely holding, Captain. I can send out a distress signal, but I can't guarantee who will hear it," said Communications Officer Peter Vance, his voice tense as he adjusted the dials on his station. "Do it, and keep trying to get that engine back, Alex. We need any thrust we can muster," James ordered, the ground now alarmingly close. Alex pounded the console in frustration. "Come on, you stubborn piece of— There, we've got minimal thrust. It's not much, but it should soften our kiss with the planet." The ship groaned under the strain as Mark managed to stabilize their descent slightly. "It's going to be a rough landing, Captain. Brace for impact." James nodded, announcing to the ship, "All hands, brace for impact. This is not a drill." The crew of the Odyssey tensed, each member securing themselves as the ship fought its inevitable meeting with the planet. The impact was less a landing and more a controlled crash, the ship plowing a long trench through a verdant field before finally coming to a shuddering halt. The silence that followed was deafening. James was the first to unstrap from his seat, his body aching but intact. He looked around at his crew, assessing their condition. "Report, is everyone okay?" Mark was checking his systems, relief evident in his voice. "All systems are down, but the hull integrity is surprisingly intact. We're alive, Captain." Alex let out a long breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "That was too close. I'll start assessing the damage to the engine and see what I can salvage." Peter's voice was shaky but determined as he reported. "The distress signal went out, but there's no way to know if it was received. Communications are down now." James nodded, his mind already shifting to survival mode. "Okay, team, let's do a quick sweep for injuries among the crew and then gear up for an external recon. We need to know if this planet is hospitable and find any resources for immediate survival." The men nodded, each moving to carry out his orders with practiced efficiency. As they prepared to step onto a world unknown, the weight of their situation settled on James's shoulders. This planet was not just a challenge, it was their new reality, at least for the foreseeable future. With a last look at his crew, hardened by the ordeal yet unbroken, James led the way to the airlock. The door hissed open, revealing the alien landscape that bathed in the light of a setting sun. It was beautiful but unknown, and James knew that every step they took from now on was into the vast unknown. Captain James Ellis led his team through the thick underbrush of the dense alien forest surrounding their crash site. The air was humid and filled with the sounds of unfamiliar wildlife, setting every nerve on edge as they moved cautiously. "Keep your eyes peeled and scanners on," James instructed, his hand resting on the sidearm at his belt. "We don't know what kind of wildlife or anything else we might encounter." Lieutenant Mark Thompson, clutching his own scanner, nodded. "The atmosphere is breathable, and there's plenty of water from what I can tell. It's almost like Earth, if Earth had purple skies and 3 moons. Chief Engineer Alex Ramirez cracked a slight smile despite the tension. "And if Earth's birds had teeth and looked at you like you're the next course." As they advanced, Communications Officer Peter Vance hung back slightly, his device raised, desperately scanning for any signal that might indicate other human technology, or the Odyssey's distress beacon echoing back from somewhere on the planet. Suddenly, the brush ahead rustled loudly, and the group tensed, weapons and scanners pointing in the direction of the noise. From the foliage, a group of figures emerged, but they were unlike any wildlife the crew had imagined. They were tall, ethereally beautiful alien women with luminescent skin that shimmered under the alien sun, eyes wide with as much curiosity as caution. "Captain," Mark whispered, "what's the protocol here?" "Slow movements, keep your weapons down but stay alert," James responded quietly, stepping forward with his hands clearly visible and empty to show they meant no harm. One of the alien women, who stood slightly ahead of the others, spoke in a lilting, melodic voice that resonated in the air. Though her words were unrecognizable, her tone and the open-handed gesture she made were clearly meant to be peaceful. James took a cautious step closer, replying in a calm, clear voice. "We come in peace. We mean no harm." The woman tilted her head, observing James intently, then responded with a series of gestures that seemed to beckon the crew forward. Mark lowered his scanner, his gaze fixed on the alien beings. "I think they want us to follow them, Captain." "Looks like it," James agreed, turning to his crew. "Let's go, but stay sharp and keep recording everything." As they followed the aliens through the forest, the environment changed subtly, the wild, untamed undergrowth giving way to paths that suggested regular use. Eventually, they arrived at a village constructed with materials that blended seamlessly with the natural surroundings, aesthetic and functional, with an air of advanced technology interwoven with nature. The crew was led to what appeared to be a central meeting area, where more of the alien inhabitants gathered, watching them with open curiosity. The leader who had first spoken stepped into the center of the circle and spoke again, her voice soothing yet commanding attention. Peter adjusted his translator device, catching bits of the language, working furiously to configure it to translate effectively. Finally, it chirped, and her words came through in broken English. "Welcome, travelers. You are far from home." James stepped forward, nodding. "Thank you for your welcome. We are indeed far from home and did not intend to intrude. We had an accident and are in need of help." The leader smiled, a gesture that seemed universal in its warmth. "You are safe here for now. Let us talk and find understanding." As night began to fall, with the 3 moons rising in the sky, a sense of uneasy peace settled over the group. They were stranded, possibly indefinitely, on a world not their own, depending on the goodwill of its mysterious inhabitants for survival. The night air was cool and filled with the soft luminescence from glowing plants surrounding the village. Captain James Ellis and his crew sat in a circle with the alien women, their leader, whom they had come to know as Maria, presiding over the meeting. Despite the language barrier slowly breaking down thanks to Peter's translating device, every exchange was fraught with the potential for misunderstanding. "Maria, we appreciate your hospitality," James began, choosing his words carefully. "Our ship is badly damaged and we need to make repairs. Can you assist us with resources?" Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We understand your need. However, sharing resources is a decision that affects all my people. We must discuss this with our council. We value balance and do not give freely without understanding the return." Mark whispered to James. "Sounds like they're cautious about depleting their resources. Makes sense." James nodded, then addressed Maria again. "We respect that. We're willing to offer knowledge exchange. We have technological and medical advancements that might be of interest to you." Maria's eyes lit up with interest. "This is a good start. We will consider. But know this, your presence here is not without its challenges for us." The conversation shifted as one of Maria's aides brought out a local fruit, handing pieces to the crew. Alex, ever the curious engineer, took a bite without hesitation. His face twisted in discomfort, and he coughed loudly, much to the alarm of the watching aliens. Maria stood abruptly, her voice tinged with concern. "You must not eat that. It is only for those of our kind. It brings sickness to outsiders." Alex gasped, struggling to clear his throat, while Peter quickly relayed apologies, explaining the misunderstanding. The crew's medic, Lisa, rushed over with her medical kit to attend to Alex. The incident, though quickly contained, left a palpable tension in the air. James tried to smooth over the misunderstanding. "We apologize deeply. Our curiosity got the better of us. It won't happen again." Maria nodded, her expression softening. "It is our oversight as well. We should have warned you. Let this be a lesson in understanding for both our peoples." The evening continued with more careful exchanges of information. Peter's device translated the Zolarians' language with increasing accuracy, allowing deeper discussions about culture, history, and technology. However, the crew was acutely aware of the need to tread carefully, their survival dependent on maintaining a good relationship with their hosts. Later, as the crew regrouped back at their temporary shelter, James convened a quick meeting. "We need to be more cautious," he stated firmly. "Every action we take reflects on us and impacts our chances of getting the help we need. Let's keep interactions straightforward and clear, and let's not eat anything else without checking first." Mark, looking over some of the data they had gathered, added, "There's a lot we can learn from them, not just about surviving here, but also about their culture and technology. We should focus on building trust through exchange and patience." As they settled down for the night, The gravity of their situation was clearer than ever. Stranded on an alien planet, surrounded by a beautiful but utterly alien culture, the crew of the Odyssey faced the dual challenge of survival and diplomacy. With each passing day, they hoped to find enough common ground to repair their ship and navigate the complex social landscape they had found themselves in. The following days brought a rhythm to the interactions between Captain James Ellis's crew and the alien women of Zalara. Each morning started with language lessons, facilitated by Peter and his increasingly effective translation device, followed by cultural exchanges and discussions about potential resource sharing. "Today, we'll learn about Zalaran agriculture," Mireia announced as she led the group through the verdant outskirts of the village. "Understanding our food sources is crucial if you are to stay among us without further incidents." James nodded, recalling Alex's unfortunate reaction to the local fruit. He watched intently as Mireia demonstrated the use of a complex tool designed for harvesting. The device was a marvel of efficiency, a testament to the advanced technological understanding of the Zalarans. Mark, always keen to understand alien technology, asked through the translator, "Is this energy source sustainable? It looks highly advanced." Mireia smiled, pleased by the inquiry. "Yes, it harnesses solar energy in a way that maximizes output while respecting the planet's balance. Perhaps this is something we can share." The crew's engineer, Alex, still slightly sheepish from his earlier faux pas, was fascinated. "I'd love to learn more about this. There might be applications for this tech that could help with our ship repairs." As the day progressed, the crew was invited to participate in a local ritual. The ceremony was deeply spiritual, involving songs that resonated with a haunting beauty. The Zalarans dressed in vibrant, flowing garments that reflected the light of Zalara's twin suns, adding a visual spectacle to the auditory enchantment. "Participation in our rituals will help you understand our values and the depth of our connection to this world," Mireia explained. "We hope this will deepen your respect and appreciation for our ways." James, always diplomatic, accepted the invitation with gratitude. "We are honored to be part of this. Thank you for sharing your culture with us." The ritual proved to be a turning point. The crew, deeply moved by the ceremony, felt a growing bond with the Zalarans. Even the most skeptical among them, like Lieutenant Mark Thompson, found themselves touched by the sincere expressions of unity and peace. "That was unlike anything I've ever experienced," Mark confessed later as the crew debriefed back at their camp. "There's a lot we can learn from them, not just technologically, but spiritually as well." As trust grew, Mireia invited James to discuss potential contributions the humans could make to the village. In a meeting filled with leaders of her community, James proposed setting up a basic medical clinic using supplies from the Odyssey. "We can offer basic health care in exchange for assistance with our ship," he suggested. "It's a way to give back to your community directly." The proposal was well received, paving the way for a deeper collaboration. Mireia expressed her community's appreciation. "Your willingness to contribute positively to Zalara while respecting our customs goes a long way in building trust." Encouraged by the progress, James and his crew began to feel less like castaways and more like integrated, albeit temporary, members of the Zalaran society. They worked side by side with the Zalarans, learning their techniques and sharing knowledge from Earth, fostering a mutual respect that transcended their differences. As the sun set on another day on Zalara, the humans felt a cautious optimism. The possibility of repairing their ship and returning home seemed more tangible, but a part of each crew member had begun to appreciate the unique beauty and harmony of Zalara. They knew that regardless of their future, the time spent on this alien planet would change them forever. Just as relations between the crew of the Odyssey and the Zalarans seemed to be solidifying into a promising partnership, a significant setback threatened to unravel the trust and progress they had made. The incident occurred during a collaborative excursion where both humans and Zalarans were gathering samples of local flora for the medical clinic project. Dr. Lisa Chen, the medical officer from the Odyssey, was particularly interested in a bright bioluminescent plant that seemed to have healing properties. Engrossed in her research, she ventured slightly off the approved path to get a closer look, unaware that she was crossing into a zone that the Zalarans considered sacred. Mireia, who was supervising the expedition, noticed too late. Her shout to stop went unheeded as Lisa clipped a sample of the plant. The reaction from the surrounding Zalarans was immediate and intense. The air filled with a tense silence, broken only by Mireia's stern voice. "Dr. Chen, you have entered the Kavara grounds. This is a sacred area, where our ancestors communicate with us through the land. Taking anything from here is a grave disrespect. Lisa, realizing her mistake, quickly tried to apologize, holding out the plant sample. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. I was just so caught up in its potential to help. James stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. Mireya, please accept our deepest apologies. It was a genuine mistake, and we meant no disrespect. How can we make this right? The Zalarans convened amongst themselves in a heated discussion that lasted several minutes. When Mireya returned, her expression was grave. This breach of respect requires a council meeting to determine the appropriate response. Until then, your team must remain within the confines of the village. Back at the village, the mood was somber. The crew gathered in their assigned quarters, anxiously discussing the implications of the incident. James addressed everyone firmly. We need to respect their decision and wait for their council's verdict. Let's use this time to review all cultural protocols Mireya has shared. We can't afford another mistake. Peter Vance, the communications officer, looked particularly worried. Captain, if they decide we're more trouble than we're worth, they could deny us any further help with the ship. We're still a long way from making it spaceworthy on our own. The following day, the crew was summoned to the center of the village, where the Council of Elders, led by Mireya, delivered their decision. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension as the elders spoke through Peter's translation device. We have considered the incident and your previous contributions to our community, one elder began. We recognize that this was an error, but it is also a sign that we must proceed with caution. We will continue our assistance with your medical clinic and ship repairs, but the exchange will now be more closely monitored. You must understand the sacredness of our land and respect our boundaries. James expressed his gratitude and renewed commitment to respecting Zalaran customs. Thank you for your understanding and continued trust. We will not let you down again. The incident served as a stark reminder of the delicate balance of cultural exchange. The crew became more vigilant about adhering to Zalaran protocols, and their interactions were marked by a heightened level of formality and respect. Despite the resolution, the incident had sown seeds of doubt among some Zalarans about the wisdom of allowing the humans so deep into their world. The crew of the Odyssey realized they were walking on thin ice and that their actions moving forward needed to be flawless to maintain the fragile peace and cooperation they had fought so hard to establish. Tensions remained high in the days following the incident at the sacred Kavara grounds. While the Zalarans had agreed to continue their assistance, their scrutiny was intense, and the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Every action the crew of the Odyssey took was now closely monitored, and their freedom to explore and interact was significantly curtailed. Captain James Ellis sensed the growing restlessness among his crew and the increasingly watchful eyes of their hosts. In a private meeting with his senior officers in the makeshift command center they had established in one part of their quarters, he addressed the situation. We need to start thinking about a backup plan, James began, his voice low. Our primary goal is still to repair the Odyssey and get off this planet, but we must consider the possibility that we might have to expedite our departure. Lieutenant Mark Thompson, his second-in-command, nodded in agreement. The repairs are still far from complete, and without their full cooperation, it's going to take even longer. We might need to think about what we can do on our own. Dr. Lisa Chen, still feeling guilty about the mishap, added, I've been working with Alex on cataloging the technology and resources we might be able to use from here. There's a lot of advanced tech that, if we could understand it fully, might just give us the boost we need. Chief Engineer Alex Ramirez, who had been tirelessly working on understanding Zalaran technology, chimed in. There's one piece of tech in particular. It's a kind of compact energy source I've seen them use. It's powerful and could potentially replace our damaged core, at least temporarily. James considered this. Alex, continue to work on that, discreetly. Everyone else, let's keep up appearances. Continue with the cultural exchanges and work duties. We can't afford to raise suspicions. As the crew got back to their daily routines, James took it upon himself to engage more directly with Mireya and the Zalaran elders, hoping to smooth over any lingering tensions and buy his crew more time. During these discussions, he emphasized their gratitude and willingness to learn from their hosts, carefully avoiding any topics that could lead to further conflicts. Meanwhile, Alex and Lisa worked late into the nights, piecing together a makeshift version of the Zalaran energy source. Their efforts were painstaking and fraught with setbacks, but gradually they began to make progress. One evening, as the twin suns of Zalara set, casting long shadows over the village, Alex whispered to James during a discreet check-in, Captain, I think we've got something. It's not perfect, but I believe it could power up the Odyssey long enough to get us into orbit. James nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over him. Good work, Alex. Let's plan to test it in 3 days. We'll need a distraction to get everyone safely on board without drawing attention. Peter Vance suggested. What about staging a cultural celebration? We can offer it as a gesture of goodwill. It might give us the cover we need. Excellent idea, Peter. Let's get that organized. I'll speak to Maria about it tomorrow. Make it a big event. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The crew divided their efforts between finalizing the celebration plans and preparing the Odyssey for a rapid departure. James worked tirelessly to ensure that their plans remained hidden from their increasingly wary hosts. Finally, the day of the celebration arrived. The Zalarans, pleased with the gesture, participated eagerly, their attention fully on the festivities. As the celebration carried on, James gave the signal. Quietly, and with hearts pounding, the crew of the Odyssey slipped away from the festivities, making their way to where the ship lay hidden by dense foliage. As they boarded their spacecraft, the weight of what they were doing, escaping the planet that had been both sanctuary and prison, settled heavily on their shoulders. With a silent prayer and a collective breath held, Alex initiated the makeshift power source. The ship's engines hummed to life, a sound that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Let's go home," James said, as the Odyssey began its cautious ascent into the starry sky of Zalara's night. As the Odyssey's engines hummed to life, hidden beneath the dense Zalaran forest, the crew held their breath. Captain James Ellis monitored the ship's systems closely, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. If their improvised technology held, they would reach orbit. If it failed, they would be stranded, or worse. Lieutenant Mark Thompson kept his eyes glued to the radar. "Captain, we have multiple incoming signals. Looks like they've noticed our movement," he reported, his voice tense. James wasn't surprised. He had anticipated that their departure might not go unnoticed. "All hands, prepare for possible hostile engagement. Alex, how long until we can make the jump to hyperspace?" Chief Engineer Alex Ramirez was furiously working at his console, recalibrating the makeshift energy source to provide maximum output. "We need at least 15 minutes to charge the jump drive. Hold them off till then." As the Odyssey ascended through the Zalaran atmosphere, sleek, fast-moving Zalaran crafts began to close in. The alien ships were agile and equipped with energy weapons that were thankfully not quite designed for space combat, giving the Odyssey a slight advantage. Peter Vance, managing communications, attempted to send a message of peace. "Zalaran vessels, this is the Odyssey. We do not wish to engage. We are leaving peacefully and request safe passage." The response was a silent but aggressive maneuver as the Zalaran ships formed a blockade. Maria's voice finally crackled over the comms, filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Odyssey, why do you flee? We offered you refuge, and in return, you steal from us and break the peace." James replied with equal gravity, "Maria, we have always appreciated your hospitality, but it is time for us to go home. We mean no harm to your people or your planet." As the conversation stalled, the Zalaran ships fired warning shots, their energy beams flashing dangerously close to the Odyssey's hull. Mark coordinated the ship's defenses, managing to deflect some of the incoming fire. "Shields at 60% and dropping. We can't take much more of this." In the tense standoff, James made a decision. "Mark, route all available power to the rear shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Alex, anything you can do to speed up the jump drive charge?" Alex, fingers flying over his console, managed a nod. "I can bypass some of the safety checks to speed it up, but it's risky." "Do it," James ordered, his gaze fixed on the view screen as Zalaran ships lined up for another volley. The next few minutes were harrowing as the Odyssey dodged and weaved through the Zalaran blockade. The ship shuddered under the strain, alarms blaring throughout the bridge. Just as the situation seemed desperate, Alex shouted over the noise, "Jump drive ready, Captain." James didn't hesitate. "Initiate jump sequence now." The world outside the view screen stretched and blurred as the Odyssey engaged its hyperdrive, leaping forward through the fabric of space. The Zalaran ships fell away, disappearing as stars turned to streaks of light. Silence fell over the bridge as the crew processed their narrow escape. James let out a long, slow breath. "Status report?" Mark checked his instruments, then relaxed slightly. "We're clear of Zalaran space, Captain. No pursuit. It looks like we made it." James nodded, feeling the weight of their actions. "Set a course for Earth, Mark. It's time to go home." The crew was quiet, each member lost in thought over what they had left behind. They had escaped with their lives, but at a cost to the trust and relationships they had built. As the Odyssey continued its journey back to Earth, James wondered if the knowledge and experiences gained were worth the bridges they had burned. Would they ever be able to return? Or had they permanently marked themselves as enemies of Zalara? Only time would tell, but for now, their focus was on returning home, where new challenges and debriefings awaited. The adventure on Zalara was over, but its impact would last a lifetime. The Odyssey's journey back to Earth was quiet and introspective. Captain James Ellis often found himself at the observation deck, staring into the vastness of space, pondering the complexities of their unintended adventure on Zalara. The thrill of escape had worn off, replaced by a contemplative silence that permeated the ship. As Earth finally came into view, a beautiful, welcoming blue orb suspended in the starlit blackness, James felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The familiar sight was comforting, yet the thought of explaining their actions to the Earth Command weighed heavily on him. Lieutenant Mark Thompson approached James, his expression serious. "We're about an hour from landing, Captain. Earth Command has been notified of our arrival and they've requested a full debriefing." James nodded, his mind racing through the potential consequences. "Thank you, Mark. Inform the crew to prepare for debriefing. Remind everyone to stick to the facts. Our actions were out of necessity, not malice." The landing was smooth, a stark contrast to their crash on Zalara. As they disembarked, the crew was greeted by a team of military personnel and high-ranking officials. The gravity of their situation became immediately apparent as they were escorted to a secure facility for debriefing. During the intense sessions that followed, James defended their decisions with a calm assertiveness. He explained the initial hospitality of the Zalarans, the cultural misunderstandings, and the eventual need to escape to preserve the safety of his crew. "We acted in the best interest of the crew and with respect for Zalaran sovereignty. When it became clear that our presence was untenable, we chose to leave peacefully," James stated, his voice steady despite the stern faces of the inquiry panel. The panel was particularly interested in the technology and knowledge acquired during their stay. Dr. Lisa Chen and Chief Engineer Alex Ramirez provided detailed reports on Zalaran technology and medical advancements, some of which could have significant implications for Earth's own technological development. The inquiry concluded with a mixed verdict. The crew was reprimanded for the unauthorized use of Zalaran technology and the potential diplomatic fallout, but was also commended for their resourcefulness and the valuable data they had brought back. As they were dismissed, James felt a bittersweet sense of closure. They had returned home, but at what cost? The data and experiences from Zalara were invaluable, yet the bridge back to that alien world was now likely irreparably burned. In the weeks that followed, as life returned to a semblance of normalcy, James often found himself in contact with various scientific and military bodies, consulting on projects influenced by their findings from Zalara. Yet his thoughts frequently drifted back to the alien planet, to Mireia, and the people who had shown them such complex hospitality. The story of their journey became a subject of both academic interest and popular fascination. James, Mark, Lisa, Alex, and the rest of the crew occasionally gave talks and interviews, each sharing their perspective on the events. Despite the accolades and the interest, James knew that the true story was more profound and personal. It was a tale of human curiosity, interstellar diplomacy, and the thin line between survival and morality. As he gazed up at the stars from the quiet solitude of his backyard, Earth firmly beneath his feet, James wondered if humanity would ever be ready for the vastness of the cosmos, not just the cold expanse of space, but the depth of understanding required to navigate the cultures that filled it. The Odyssey's unintended journey had opened a door to the stars, but it had also shown how much they still had to learn. As he turned his gaze from the stars back to Earth, James hoped that one day they would be ready to step through that door again. This time, not as accidental tourists, but as wise, respectful explorers.